Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. The book Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, came out in 2020, followed by Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. And a year later, Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. Then Raised by These Wolves, Volume 2, Child Trafficking Through the Foster Care and Court Systems, came out July 17th, 2024 as a bestseller. And I have a return guest on. I'm very happy to have Deborah Craig on all the way from Scotland. She was last on season 4, episodes 26 and 56 back in 2023, where we had talked about toxicity in families and friends and how to create the life you love and what means to you. And today we're going to talk about the nervous system regulation on her website that I found and I found very helpful. I totally welcome you, Deborah Craig. So glad to have you back.
Thank you. I absolutely love being here. I can't actually believe it was 2023. So that's, I can't remember what exact months, but some of that was obviously then a full year ago.
Right, March 16th, 2023.
Wow,
Yeah.
time flies.
Mm-hmm.
Time flies where you haven't changed a bit. So
Oh,
that's a
you haven't
compliment.
either.
Well, we must be doing something right then, Marianne, if we're still looking the same 12
Right.
months on.
Definitely, definitely. And when I came across I went back to your website and I found the nervous system regulation hypnosis. It was like, I'll try this out. And it was really good. I did it for weeks and weeks and weeks because I just felt so dysregulated. I don't know if it was, hormones. We were talking earlier about
Yes,
peri-menopause. Isn't this so
yes.
much fun? I mean, guys are so lucky. They don't know how lucky they are. They don't have to go through this stuff.
No. And it's a the when I talk about nervous system regulation, there's so many different ways that our nervous system can be dysregulated.
Mm.
And that to me always seemed like the core of where a lot of the people that I was speaking to, clients, etc., even people that were in my, friends and family network, that the anxiousness that was building up, the fear, the impending doom, the waiting for the other shoe to drop, the catastrophizing, all the common sort of phrases that we're used to. And what I recognized was that in that state of fear, that worry, that perpetual fight or flight, it was really difficult for us to figure out, right, what am I doing with my life? Or how do I take the first steps towards resolving a problem? How do I pull myself out of this freeze state that I'm in? Because when we're in that fear state, that fight or flight for so long, sometimes we can end up getting to a point where we end up just not being able to make any kind of movement at all. So we just almost shut down. And through this journey of understanding my clients better and really just talking in my own lived experience, that was one of the roots for me where I found that a lot of issues were happening for people was in the nervous system. So we can have our nervous system gets dysregulated in so many ways, and it can cause anxiety. Comes from chronic stress. We've got how does it even manifest itself? Well, childhood trauma, one-off things that happen to us in life, like a one-off trauma that happens. It could be learned behavior. A lot of people I speak to, they've had mothers, fathers, siblings, aunts, caregivers who were all highly dysregulated nervous systems, really anxious people, that then their children picked up on that and they become my clients and they have that feeling, but I've always been this way, because they learned that from other people. It could be untreated chronic stress. So a lot of people that I speak to, especially corporate professionals, like CEOs, senior leaders, people that run businesses, when you've got lots of decisions to make, you've got lots of responsibility in your shoulders, it gets really challenging sometimes. And if that chronic stress isn't dealt with and we haven't learned to manage our nervous system and regulate it, then that's when we can hit burnout. And for some people, even worse, it can be, depression, it can be physical symptoms, gut health issues, IBS,
Mhm.
skin issues, a whole host of different things that can all come from a dysregulated nervous system. So for me, when I haven't worked with many, many, many clients over the years, one of the key things that I noticed was this nervous system and how if people could learn how to regulate it themselves, then they can have that clarity to then create a better life for themselves. And that is really why I ended up creating a lot of my hypnosis around that area, which is what you tapped into and
Mhm.
kindly gave me lovely feedback on, that you were thoroughly enjoying and finding benefit from.
Mhm. And I thought it was great. I did it for weeks and weeks, and I would really like to go back to doing that every morning. As I'm waking up, it's probably a good time to do that, I would think,
Mhm,
uh, you know,
definitely.
or even when you're probably going to bed too, just to
Mhm.
do that as well. Is there a specific time that's better to do it or not? Doesn't
No,
matter.
the key thing with hypnosis is it's a state of wakefulness. So
Mhm,
whilst it's absolutely fine if you fall asleep, it will still go into your subconscious. It is ideal if you are not in a complete sleep zone, because for me, when I work with clients, that's one of the things that they often worry about is, oh, what if I fall asleep? And I'll encourage them to remember that it's not, the goal isn't to go to sleep. The goal is to be in a state of alertness, but with total relaxation, so
mhm,
that the subconscious will be doing the work. The nervous system gets to calm down because the monkey mind has switched off and the whole body starts to regulate itself. So it really doesn't matter what time you listen. It
mhm.
would be a time that feels optimum for you to listen to it without necessarily going to sleep at the same time. That being said, there's a lot of hypnotherapists out there that will tell you it really doesn't matter. So I think it's just personal choice. But for my personal clients, I usually recommend that they do it without going straight into a deep sleep. But
Mhm.
as I said, it still hits the subconscious either way. So even
Right.
if you're listening at night and you just happen to drift off to my dulcet tones, all of the information will still sink in. So it's not a big
Yeah, it
problem.
goes right into the
Yeah.
subconscious.
Mm-hmm. It
I
does.
just thought it was amazing because it helped me so much to calm down. I'm
Yeah,
running these podcasts and talking to parents on the phone. This does bring a stress,
for sure.
hearing people's stories where they are helpless and you can't help them. Just hear their story and hear them out. But with your, nervous system regulation, hypnotism, it just really calmed me down.
Yeah. Well, the thing I often say to people is, if for you to be able to be the best version of you and to deliver the service that you want to service, which is hold space for these other people that need your support, we can't operate from an empty cup. So, and I am the same. If you think about the work that I do, I'm
Mhm,
always listening to people and their issues and problems and difficulties. And of course, they tell me a lot of good stuff as well, but there's a huge part of it. You're doing really quite deep work with them. So, for if you're able to find that inner calm yourself, if you can regulate your own nervous system, bring yourself back down into center, um, by able to do that, you're automatically filling up your own cup again. Because if you're just constantly in a cycle of worry and fear and panic and exhaustion, then you run out of energy for other people and you're not at your best, and then you're not delivering at your best. And what I find with some people is that's then when the guilty conscience comes in, like, oh, I'm not as present as I could be, or I don't feel as if I'm doing as much as I could be because we're running an empty. So
mhm.
this makes sense that you would do some kind of work like that for yourself.
Right, right. I think a lot of people are running on empty, and that is something that it just your health will take a toll. I myself have stomach ulcers that I've had since I was 21, but other people have other issues. They start getting, you know, lupus or other things that come on when they've got all this stress and they can't manage the stress. It's sometimes it's I don't know if it's not manageable sometimes.
Yeah, the one that I quite often will speak to clients about is really sort of explaining about the gut brain axis, where every thought that we have creates a message that's sent down into the gut or into the body, and the body will have a correlating response. The problem is that a lot of our thoughts, if they're negative or fear-based, will be sending our body into a state of fight or flight. So
Mhm.
what happens is, if your body's in a state of fight or flight, it has basically moved to a place of trying to keep you safe. So it's preparing the body, it's pumping the body full of cortisol, it's
Mhm.
priming the body and the muscles to either fight back or to run away, right? Now, when it's in that state, it has also recognized that it doesn't have time to protect us from illness. It doesn't have the ability to digest our food properly. So,
Mhm.
this is where we often find that when we're highly stressed, it can be quite often correlated with periods of illness, particularly like we get a lot of colds, or we're getting the flu, or our throats, or we're getting the headaches. Or a lot of clients I work with, it's gut health issues.
Mhm.
So they will talk to me about colitis and IBS and, all these types of things that when you actually unpack it, so whilst
Mhm.
they will speak to, I work in connection with a dietitian.
Mhm.
So she often gets clients who come to her for gut problems. But when she speaks to them and she hears about their lifestyle and how their life is, she often sends them to me first,
Mhm.
because they need to manage their anxiety. So, in other words, they need to learn how to regulate their nervous system. They need to bring themselves back down to center. And from there, a large proportion end up not needing the dietitian,
Mhm.
because actually, once they've managed their stress and their anxiety, the gut health problems go down significantly.
Mhm.
So what ones sometimes people think, it's got that I've got this gut health issue, so therefore it must be a food intolerance or something like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Turns out actually, once I've looked at my life, I'm stressed out, I'm busy all the time, I can't say no to things, I'm always doing extra work, add it all on, and add to that maybe not such a great lifestyle, maybe alcohol or late nights and doom scrolling on your phone and not very much exercise. Actually, when you put all of that together, it's no wonder that your gut isn't playing ball, because we're not offering it the best solutions to help it operate at its fullest. So that's just another little aspect to the work that I do. As I said, I work alongside, I'm in a collaboration with a dietitian, and I've learned a lot on that journey in the last few years, about how the gut and the brain speak to each other,
Mm.
and everything's a signal between the two. So if you feel a physical symptom like IBS or sore stomachs or migraines, then you can probably put the bet on that there'll be something going on psychologically for you
Mhm.
that you might not be aware of until you pause long enough to ask yourself those questions, like, what am I worrying about? What's going on for my life that's stressing me out? Because the two often go together. Now, not exclusively, but most of the time.
Right, and going back to perimenopause and this horrible menopause we're inflicted with, I mean, from what I saw, growing up is, one relative was constantly screaming at their spouse, and it was hormones, the
Yep.
dysregulation as well, and, back then, there really wasn't a whole lot of hormone treatment.
No. It just wasn't talked about the way it is now. It's in the last few years that it's really we started to shine a light on it. And I think it's got positives and not so positives, I think, with that, because it's good to have the awareness, because we all need to get extra support where we need it. But we also don't want to have that then as as a fallback excuse for why things are the way we are, because there's a lot of things that we can do to help ourselves individually that will actually improve the situation overall. But one of the things that I hear a lot just now is, especially with women at that peri age, they're in really great careers, they are quite high up in their company, or they've got a really successful business, and they hit that peri-menopause age, and out of nowhere the anxiety just skyrockets. They start, imposter syndrome. They're thinking, where did this come from? Like, it just feels like out the blue. And I can remember it myself when I had my first experience of it, and it was quite a few years ago. So I just wasn't as aware of what I am now. But once I found out about a lot of how it works and the hormone shifts and all that, I looked back and I remember a specific time in my business, and the anxiety at the time was just through the roof. Now, it wasn't constant, but it was when I was going into client work, it was like I would freeze and I couldn't hold two thoughts in my head for longer than 2 seconds. Now, thankfully, I was able to move through it and I knew how to ground myself, etc. But it was exhausting because I had to work hard to move through it. But I didn't know at the time that at that point was the very starting stages of perimenopause for me, because it just didn't, as I said, it just wasn't talked about as much. It's only been in the last few years that we've really started to hear about it. But I do find that I've worked with many, many women who have either left a career early or have been thinking about stepping down in some capacity because they've not known where the anxieties came from, and the self-doubt, the constant questioning themselves, the feeling that they can't cope. And that's where coming back again to lifestyle, the shifts we need to make in there with exercise and our diet and alcohol, and then add to that, regulate your nervous system, work on your limiting beliefs, all these types of things, they all go hand in hand, to be honest.
It does. It does. It just is just very frustrating. Also, intrusive thoughts that
My
create
goodness,
this
yes.
anxiety.
100%. And, I'm not going to sit here, Marianne, and tell you that I don't ever get any, because I don't think that's realistic. I think the most important thing is not to pretend that they don't happen, or that I don't get impending doom moments, or I don't doubt myself, or, I don't get stressed or a bit anxious. It's more about knowing how to stand still in the eye of the storm and not actually have a meltdown. I think that for me is the ultimate goal. And that's what I'm trying to teach people is, when you work with the nervous system, it's not to say I'm going to be all zen and be on a beach and pretend my life isn't real. No, it's about being able to be in my life and see it for what it is and still be able to stay in control without everything running away from me at a rate of knots. And that includes the intrusive thought. So I'll have a thought, right? Let's just keep it real here, Marianne. I will have a thought that's like, so maybe say I do a social media post, right? And it doesn't go as well as I'd hoped. Sure, I'll have a thought that says, yeah, you're useless at this. You're a loser. You're this. I have those moments where I have those thoughts because I'm a human being. But the difference is, in the past for me, or for other people, what I see is they can't break out of that. And when that thought becomes a bigger thought, it then becomes the spiral, and that one thought becomes 10, which then makes a problem that was that size, which is one post that didn't do well, right? It's not a big deal. It's now became, I'm the worst person in the world, can't do this, my business is going to implode, and I'm terrible at writing content, which is what could happen if you're not good at nipping it in the bud here.
Right.
And that's what that's part of the nervous system regulation, is being able to help people find the tools, rewire the subconscious, heal the nervous system so that they, as I said, they can stand in the eye of the storm if they have to, and then they can pull themselves out of it without being dragged into that tornado that goes along with it. And that's kind of ultimately the goal, because we can't stop anxiety in the sense of, why would we remove the fear center from the brain? That's insane, because we need to be able to know that a risky business deal is a risky business deal. That a get rich quick scheme is exactly what it says in the tin. It's get rich quick and you're about to lose your money. Or, let's not try and walk in front of that car because it's just too close. If we took the whole fear center away, then we would make really, really unhealthy and quite silly choices. So we still need to have that part of our brain that goes, wait a minute, you need to slow down here because I don't think this is a good idea. But the thing that we want to be able to do is not get caught in that loop at that point. It's to let that prefrontal cortex, the bit at the front, which is your logic, your reasoning, problem solving, it's to get to that part of the brain. And then we can talk ourselves down and go, actually, that's not true. And that's ultimately the journey, is to try to stop getting stuck in the cycle.
It's almost like you have to point out reality to yourself.
Yeah, I said it in 10,000 words. You said it in one statement. Well done. That's exactly it.
Well,
Yes.
I try to do that. I mean, it's if you're not getting picked on social media, which I had an incident where that had happened and it had gotten bad. And I just had, like you said, you think, oh gee, maybe I suck at this, maybe this isn't, maybe I just should just quit. But when you're putting out good content and you're putting out good content because you do get good feedback, and you may have gotten bad feedback from a certain professional, you've got to just step back and, and someone said, don't let anything steal your creativity.
And that's such an important point, because as a business owner, or as a senior leader in an organization, you need to be able to think clearly. You need to get creative, whether it's for your out of the box solutions, if it's problem solving, or if you're like us that run a business, you need to be creative in the sense of you're always coming up with strategies and writing your social content and video making. But I'll tell you, the biggest thief of that is the anxious thinking. It will literally put you into a freeze state, because I've been there and I will still go there at varying points because I'm a human being. And there's that time in the month where you just know it's like wading through treacle, trying to get anything done because you're just not firing on all cylinders and the anxiousness has risen. But it's an understanding that this too shall pass. Accepting that it's a feeling and a thought, it's not a fact. And my favorite question that I get all my clients to ask themselves, including myself, is that true, or is that a story I'm telling myself? Because it's so easy for us to get caught up in a story about what we think is true instead of the reality.
Because do you think a lot of people have poor self-esteem, so they start feeding themselves this negativity?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
I just wish
I see it
people,
all the time.
right. And I know there's certain situations that put people with, a negative self-esteem. Sometimes it's caused by their upbringing
Oh,
or
without a doubt. Yeah.
something else that had happened later in life. But I always, encouraged people to, it's not your fault. You have to dig deeper, and it's not you, it's them.
100%. And we're all dealt different cards. There's no denying it. And I'm not really one for, I can recognize if I'm in victimhood mentality, or, the woe is me. It doesn't particularly happen very often now because I'm pretty resilient and I can always find a way forward. But, for people who have had upbringings that are traumatic, there's no two ways about it. It completely changes even how your brain is wired. Like, we'll have different thought processes, we'll have different belief systems because of what we've been exposed to. My nervous system was completely shot to bits when I was a child, and that is a contributory factor to some of the then unfolding events, in my 20s and my 30s, until I had a complete wake-up call and I was able to turn everything around for myself. But I did recognize that the running away from everything was coming from the desire to stay in that sort of drama zone, if you will, So it was easier to stay in the drama of everyone else's life. And it was all, panic, panic. But the minute that I realized, I'm going to have to slow down and look at myself, as scary as that was, that's the game-changing point. And that, to me, is most of the time when a client will come to me, when they are just at that stage where they've tried this, they've tried that, they've tried regular therapy, they've tried a coach, they've tried self-help, they've done all these different things, and they're just somehow not getting to the root of what's going on, or they've just not felt they've faced themselves enough and their own story. And once they do that, like I can this for myself as well, once I stopped and looked at myself, as hard as it was, my life was never been the same again. I've got family, and I know that they've grown a lot. So bearing in mind, we've all been in the same environment. We've all had different experiences, but the point is we were all there in the same environment. And I can see significantly the difference between each of us and how we operate in the world now. And I still see two very strong fear-based approaches to life. And I see the results they get, and I see how the relationships they have and different things like that versus what my life is like. Because I've done that work on myself. So because I've done all that work and had the lived experience, that was one of the biggest drivers for doing the career that I've got now. Because I knew I could see how you could change your life, you could change your results, you could change how you felt every day, you could change how you felt about people when you experience them. Because if you're dysregulated all the time, if you're anxious, if you're a nervy person, do you know how hard it is to put your trust in anybody? Or how hard it is to even just make friends without paranoia that there's some other sinister motive, or and this is why I'm saying this about family, because I see a lot of that, and I feel sorry for people in that respect, because you're living a bit of a half life. Your life could be fuller, it could be freer, if you could just set yourself free from your own mental prison.
Yeah, I like how you said that, set yourself free from your own mental prison. I think a lot of people are in this because of their relatives or relationships have gone bad with their kids, and they're beating themselves up thinking, well, gee, we gave them everything. Why are they turning on us?
Yep. It's difficult. When if I think back to my own lived experience or even other clients, there's a lot that we can't change, and it's not easy to do it. But I found forgiveness is the way that I found to stop the shaming myself, beating myself up because I felt shameful about things in my past, things that I'd done, things maybe I'd been exposed to, things I'd experienced. And so two versions of forgiveness: forgiving myself for accepting, and I teach my client, I don't teach them, but I work with my clients a lot to work with that part of themselves that feels shame, that feels guilt, that feels the frustration, the anger, the jealousy, whatever it is, and to recognize that part of them has actually had a life filled often with trauma, with terrible things happening to them with, anything from violence, physical, mental, poverty, or it doesn't even need to be things like that. It could even just be, strict parents or exposed to bullying at school, really severe bullying. So many factors can start it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not rectified at the time, it gets compounded all the way through adult life. So
Oh,
if no one
yeah.
ever tells you that that isn't who you are, then you'll go through your whole life thinking that you are that person that gets bullied all the time, or you're that person who never has any money because, or has never been lucky because, or I've never been successful, so I'll never be successful. This is how we build all of that, and it will come from earlier times in life. And when I work with clients, I'm often getting them to sort of forgive that version of themselves because they didn't know any better. Did they
Mm-hmm.
have the right guidance? Did they have the right mentorship? Did they have strong parents that were able to navigate them on their path? Or were they just meandering about, making mistakes and not knowing what was happening? Because how can you blame yourself for that if you didn't know any different? And I find a lot of clients will hold on to a lot of stuff throughout their life. And I try and help them recognize that you have to be able to forgive that part of you,
Mm-hmm.
because that person has just been on a journey, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that they run the show. They are not who you are in your entirety, because there's a whole other parts of you that are amazing. So it's helping you understand that these two, the good bits and the challenging bits can work together. But
Mm-hmm.
I find that it's understanding those parts of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
forgiving those parts, releasing the shame and the guilt, allows us then to help them settle down and not be dominant
Mm-hmm.
and be destructive in our life, which is what happens when our nervous system gets dysregulated and we have outbursts and
Mm-hmm.
childlike behaviors. And it's like, what the heck's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, that's that wee part of you
Right.
that hasn't been healed coming to the surface.
Right. And you're getting upset over something simple.
Yes,
Something.
because it's disproportionate.
Right.
So you're triggered by something. You
Mm-hmm.
have this big outburst or a really strong response. It doesn't feel like it correlates to the situation, but what's happening is you're having a physical response to something in the moment that is likely being to something that happened many, many, many years before. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the feeling is the same, even although it's not the same situation that's happening, but the feeling is the same. It may be embarrassment, shame, stress, hurt, jealousy. It could be anything. You could just get that full visceral feeling, and then the next minute you're having a response, and it doesn't feel as if it matches what's happening. But it's
Right.
because likely it's not been that. That's when you call your triggers.
Mm-hmm.
That's understanding what is it that's triggering me, and maybe where did that come from, because it doesn't match what's happening right now as an adult.
Right. You'll see, you may start your kids will say something and then you can start yelling because you're just so tired of whatever that they have said that has triggered something in you in the past. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, you got to step back because I know this has happened to me. You know, we've all, we've all screamed at our kids. I think we all can admit
Mm.
that. But it's caused by something else that happened in the past. And I didn't know that was happening until, I'm having this conversation with you.
So, especially what the thing is, the children will push all of our buttons to the limits. I don't
Yeah.
have, but I've got two nieces, and I see what my sister, I watch my sister, and I think, wow, you need the patience of a saint. But
Right.
quite often, what happens is we have these outbursts, and it can often just as well just come from pure exhaustion.
Right.
because kids will test us. That's what they do. And they'll push the boundaries and they'll push the limits. And they might say things, as you say, that trigger something within us. And we think, oh God, that made me feel a certain way. And it maybe took me back to another time in my life. But when it comes to the children, it's very easy for, I think, easy to get worn down
Mm-hmm.
because it's exhausting being a parent. Like I watch it as, as my
Yeah.
sister, and I say to her all the time, I'm like, you need to take time for you, even if it's just that amount of time, because
Mhm.
when you're running an empty, back to that same conversation we had earlier, when you're running an empty, you're going to be reactive rather than responding because you've got nothing in the tank.
Right. I agree with you. Right.
Right. So when you're able to step back and do something, anything just for yourself, whether it's a reset, is it a hypnosis audio, is it a 10-minute walk round the block, is it, I don't know, there's all these different things that I know a lot of parents are very pushed for time, and I get that,
Mhm.
but it's own oxygen mask on first type behavior here.
Yes.
Otherwise what happens is you have a reaction, and it might be more, you then you start beating yourself up because you're like, oh God, why did I have that reaction? There was no need for
Mm-hmm.
that. But often, especially with kids, it could be something relatable back to childhood, absolutely, or another time in your life. But a lot of the times with people that I know that are parents, they're frazzled, and
Oh.
it's more of an empty tank for them than
Mm-hmm.
it is anything necessarily triggerable. But it's not to say that there isn't something else lurking in there, that's from the past that could. Kids have got a way of saying certain things, yeah,
Yeah.
and you think, oh wow, I didn't see that coming, because they've got no filter a lot of the time and have no concept, especially at certain ages, of what could be hurtful. And you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. I've heard clients in the past say, I know it was my kid and they didn't mean it, but my God, it just reminded me of the way my mother used to speak to me, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it has that visceral, oh, that just made me feel really not good about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely something in that.
Right. That and, parents either working 2 jobs or 3 jobs
Yeah,
or having an extremely high stress job. And it just takes, you could have 2 or 3 kids just fighting amongst themselves and, you're like, "Knock it off."
absolutely. It's exhausting,
Mhm.
without a doubt. So that's where I definitely, the being frazzled thing
Mhm.
is one. When I work with a lot of people who work businesses and corporate jobs and have children, and maybe a parent that's sick or needs extra responsibility, that type of thing, that's the type of person, when I see it, I think you're so close to burnout.
Oh.
You're not liking who you are,
Mhm.
because you're reacting in really ways that you don't even know why you're doing it. You're being nippy with everybody, you're being irritable, you're snarking, you're being passive aggressive, you're tired all the time.
Oh, yes.
You cancel everything because you've just not got anything in the tank to even do anything other than just the bare minimum.
Mhm.
Um, that's the close to burnout phase, and I
Oh,
think definitely people with children can
yeah.
easily hit that phase when they're trying to juggle all the different balls in the air at once.
Mhm.
And I used to say to people, certain clients, I would say, right, when you have all these balls in the air,
Mhm.
just figure out which ones are glass,
Mhm.
because that's the only ones that you need to catch today. And everything else will bounce and will come back to you the next day.
Mhm.
So if picking your kids up for school and doing something and there's something and something, what are the ones that, if you don't do them, are catastrophic? Right, I must pick my kids up from school at
Right.
this time, and I must do this for the dinner because we've got to eat. But clear out the kids' toy box, even although that's annoying me. Does that need to be on the agenda in this moment? Because what I notice with a lot of people that are anxious and stressed, they retain this list as long as their arm of things that need to get done. But the list is just one enormous, a never-ending list, instead of a list of things that you want to get done, which you then pick off a certain amount that there's a time frame you think I'd love to get them done this month because there's a reason for it. And then from that list, here's 2 or 3 things that are the mandatories that I need to get done today, and one nice to have, instead of walking around with this chaotic head of, oh my God, what have I forgotten about this? I've forgotten about the kids' play that I've got to go to. What about the singing lesson? And you're trying to remember all these different things. But if you can offload it out of your mind, for all the people listening that are parents, put it out of your mind, put it on a bit of paper, keep your list, your big long list. You can add to it all you want, but only pick out the things that, think about the glass balls, especially on a day that you're exhausted. Only focus on the things, because one of my sisters, and she's got kids, and sometimes she'll say to me, I've got the kids to pick up, and then I've got the guitar lesson, and then I've got this, and then I've got the beds to make, and I've got a dinner to cook. And then she'll say, and I've still got the kitchen left to paint, and then I need to get to B&Q to get more paint brushes. And I think, right, you just listen to what you're saying there. I know that the painting's problem is bothering you, and I know you need to do this, but how about you just find a time that's more appropriate for something like that? Because when you put it into this big massive list, it just feels like you're never getting anywhere fast.
Yeah, that's true. It's like you're spinning your wheels.
100%. 100%.
And just step back and look at what really needs to be focused on now.
Yeah, because yes, things do need to be done. And yes, there's things that need to be done within a time frame. That's okay. We're always going to have priorities, but what I find with people that are really anxious and, dysregulation in the nervous system, and they're stressed and all this kind of stuff, they're not as good at 2 main things: healthy boundary setting and prioritizing. It seems to fall down in these areas. So, they can't say no to things. And when they can't say no, it piles up. And then they're resentful about the thing that they've said yes to, because they're exhausted and they don't really have the time. But because they've not learned the art of healthy boundary setting, they keep getting themselves into this cycle of chaos and of being rushed off their feet. And it's not nice to feel resentful about something. So I've said this loads of times to people, especially my sisters. So they'll maybe say yes to something and I hear them moaning about it. And I've often said, when you say yes to something, you should have that element of you that wants to do it. Now, even if it's putting you out your way, that's okay, because if you know it's important to somebody, you've got the capacity, or you're squeezing it in because you know it's going to be a massive help to them, don't moan about it. Because if you're moaning about it, you're resenting it. And if you're resenting it, it means you don't have the energy or the time to do it. So you have to be able to at least say, yes, I do want to help you. But if you can wait to this day or this time, that's the best time that I can give you my full attention and energy. You have to learn ways to say no without saying no, if you will.
Right.
Although no is fine, but a lot of people don't like going from being a yes person all the time to a blunt no person. And there are ways to say no without saying, no, I don't want to help you.
Right.
There's different ways we can get around it. And, between the unhealthy boundaries and the not being able to prioritize, everything just becomes madness.
Oh, and very quickly at that.
Very, very quickly. And then you hit burnout. And if you haven't figured it out, when you hit burnout, for anyone that's ever been in a burnout phase, you could be minimum 3 months in recovery if you're able to take time off your work. And if you can't get time off your work, but you're taking a step back and you're trying to work on yourself, goodness, you could be 6 months, maybe up to a year before you feel back to your old self.
Mm-hmm.
But it does require a lot of action on your part to set the boundaries, prioritize, take care of your mental health, your physical health, your diet, your sleep, your exercise. And it's not about saying become a whiz at all these things. It's about understanding what actually fuels the body,
Mm-hmm.
what takes care of the body, and what, on a personal level, I work on all of those things as a person. But the thing that I specifically help people with, obviously, is deep healing of the nervous system, trauma release, releasing old belief systems that don't serve them,
Mm-hmm.
and of helping them avoid burnout. So by really helping them with the overthinking, the catastrophizing, the poor boundary setting, all those things that they struggle with, that eventually, if you don't take care of, will lead you to burnout. That's basically how I help people. And there's lots of ways you can do it yourself. Obviously, if you like to be able to go deep and do some real transformational work, then you work with somebody. But there's a lot out there, from things like, I've got some ASMR on my YouTube channel. I've got some free hypnosis, and there's stuff on my website. But there's also even, I don't have any of this on my channels. It's not the thing that I create, but I do enjoy it, is the Hertz music. So
Mm-hmm.
where it's just sounds, the Hertz sounds, so
Right.
different sound waves actually connect with different parts of the body, in the sense that some are for healing, some are for clarity, some are for, calm. And when you don't want anything spoken,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you don't want words, you don't want to have to follow anything in your head, you just want the body to do its thing and the mind, then I really enjoy the Hertz music for that.
Is
Have
that,
you ever listened to that yourself? You ever tuned in?
I think, like that's like megahertz, right?
Yes. So
Right.
like,
Yes.
so it's basically just like sounds, and it's kind of like waves and certain kind of sounds, and it's quite entrancing in itself, because again, it almost like guides you without words into that, almost like that meditative or hypnotic state, and it
Mm-hmm.
allows the body to regulate itself. So this is where, hypnotherapy is different, because there's language patterns, there's words, there's goals towards helping you heal specific things. But if you want to just work completely content free, somatically, and without any kind of guidance, but you just want to work on yourself, then sounds like through ASMR, or the Hertz music, just the sounds, these types of things can be really game changing. And because I do believe in all of the take a breath, we need the breath work. Yes, we do, 100%. Fastest way to calm the nervous system, deep breathing,
Mm-hmm.
go for a walk, jump about, move your energy. There's so many different things we can do. But I'm just sort of exploring a lot of different things of late. And
Mm-hmm.
I've quite enjoyed some ASMR, not all of it, just to be clear, because some of it I don't like the sounds, but some ASMR and some of the Hertz music. I'm enjoying that.
Yeah,
How would
that
you?
is, yeah, I discovered that, oh, many years ago too. Some of it can go for like 6 hours on YouTube.
Yes, it can. It definitely can. Yeah, I think these ones would be ideal if, say, you were someone that wanted to use it going to sleep and stuff like that at
Mhm.
night. I actually sleep really well. So I do have my moments where I'm a bit, but I would say 98% of the time I go to my bed. I have good sleep hygiene though.
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
don't sit up all night, and I'm an early riser.
Yeah.
I physical exercise during the day. All these things, like I've figured it out now. What really gets you to your maximum, optimum deep sleep,
Mhm,
um, and for that reason, I wouldn't listen to anything all through the night.
mhm.
Sometimes I listen to things just before I go to sleep, because I quite like the relaxing sounds, and then I'll just switch it off, put it to the side, and then within a few minutes I'm sleeping, and
Right.
then I just wake naturally. So lots of different things that are helpful for sleep, good sleep, because that's another thing about anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
the nervous system. If you have a terrible sleep, oh my goodness, you just wake up pumped full of cortisol and
It's
you're really
horrible.
away, you're off in the wrong foot before you even start. This is why I encourage a lot of clients to understand good sleep hygiene. It's not always about the morning, because by the time the morning comes, it's too late
Mm-hmm.
to fully resolve anything, because a really good morning is preceded by an excellent evening routine,
Right, right.
so no screens, or at least screen reduction, as you're going to your bed. Maybe listen instead of watching,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's not, again, the eyes. Reading books, um, going to your bed at a time that gives you a good amount of time before you need to go to sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
I've found if I try and go to sleep and try and sleep within 10-15 minutes, that can be a bit trickier.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go up to my room and settle myself and maybe listen to something relaxing, within about half an hour, 40 minutes, I'm ready for a very sound sleep. But if I didn't go to my bed
Mm-hmm.
until I needed to go to sleep, that would take me like almost into my next sleep cycle. And if I miss my
Oh,
90, the 90-minute rule thing there, if you miss that bit, I could be awake for another hour and a half. And I just think it's just not worth it, because I still wake up early. So I
oh,
don't gain anything from it.
right. And it's like you haven't slept at all, even if you did sleep like 5 hours.
Yes.
I,
Yeah.
and last night I was just really fatigued, and I was started at like 6:30. I was just sitting on the couch watching TV, and I caught myself dozing off. It's like, wake up, because if you sleep now, it's gonna be harder to fall asleep at like 9:30. I don't know what it is.
100%. 100%. I think I don't mind the odd. Let's say I'm up really early, or I've had a broken sleep. I've done a lot of working out and a lot of work. There might be the odd time I'll just rest my eyes. I'm not sleeping and I'm not awake. I'm somewhere in between. I might be able to hear sound, but it's a bit like the hypnosis state, because it's like between two worlds, fully
Uh,
awake and deep sleep. You're in the middle, REM sleep, and I'll feel myself drifting, and maybe like 15 or 20 minutes will pass, and then I'll come back and I think, oh, and it will refresh me. And I
mhm,
think that's the difference. It's if you can, but if you're going to go into a deep sleep, yeah, that can be problematic then for you to
mhm.
get to sleep in the evening. It's like a kid. Remember, we a toddler,
Yeah.
all the times I used to remember my sister saying, "Don't let her fall asleep in the back of the car. Don't let her fall asleep. Don't
Yeah,
let her fall asleep, or
exactly.
she'll not sleep tonight." Right? It's not too dissimilar for ourselves.
Right, right. When you were talking about, in between the wake and the sleep, I remember asking my grandmother, who was full-blooded Italian. She never spoke Italian around us or her own kids, because they wanted them to be Americanized, you know? They loved America, they wanted them to speak.
Right?
They didn't want that language barrier. But I said, "What is it when, in between the wake and the sleep?" She said, "That's called travagliazione in
Oh,
Italian." And it's like, I would love to see Italy someday. And we were talking earlier that you got to go see it.
well,
And
yeah. And I actually started to download one of the apps, because I kept thinking I'd love to be a bit conversational with Italian when I go here. So yes, definitely. And I've always been drawn to Italy. I always say it, this is without the word of a lie. You've surprised me telling me there's Italy in your own heritage, because I've always said, oh, I think if I did one of those tests, I think I'm part Italian in there somewhere. I've always had this weird draw towards Italy. It's very
mhm.
bizarre.
Well,
Very
when they
bizarre.
were building Hadrian's Wall way back, what was that? I'm trying to remember. Is it like the
Not good
1300
with
AD?
history.
Right? I can't remember. I used to know all that stuff. But you don't know, because the Romans were doing that, and I'm sure they intermarried with people there. And then they split because of the Viking attacks and got too cold, and the Romans couldn't handle the cold. So you
You just
could.
never know, yeah. I always think that. I think, yeah, the dark hair, the sallow skin. I was
Mhm.
like, I have this really weird obsession with Italy. Like, I'm always imagining that I lived there. I've always thought that. It's like, I'm going to do a stint there where I'm probably going to live there for a while, even if it's just to travel around all the beautiful villages and all the different parts of it. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'll keep you updated if any of that comes off, since it's in your heritage. And have you been in any part of Italy before?
No, I haven't. My grandmother was Calabrese, which is from southern Italy,
Right,
and my grandfather was Montenero, which was northern Italy, and their
right.
dialects were different. So if you
Oh,
say Trevelyason to someone, they might in Italy they might be like, okay, I got to figure out what that means, because
yeah,
of the dialects are
yeah.
different there too. But somehow they connected and got married, and came over
There you
here and
go.
had
The
kids.
the rest is history.
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep you posted in my travels, because I'll be off and running with them again next year. That's for sure.
Oh,
But
definitely.
yeah. So anything else that you can think that we've not touched on in the space of the nervous system? And my only other one brief thing I would say is I find it very closely linked to the other two areas that I help people with, because I find they're all intrinsically linked. Is if you've not got calm, it's very difficult to confidently take action because you're sitting in the fear zone. And
Mhm.
if you're not calm, you're also quite foggy, because it's difficult to make a decision because you're bouncing between fight or flight, and your indecision happens, which then makes it quite difficult to be clear on your next steps. So for me, the three things sit so close: the calm, that calm, anxiety, nervous system, all of that being regulated, then gives you that sort of strength of self to confidently take an action, because the fear isn't so strong, because you're able to move forward. And then once you start taking steps forward, you get the clarity about where the journey's opening up. It's just, if you're sitting in the fear zone, the panic, the fog, all of that, the other two parts are really, really difficult. And I think that's
Mhm.
often why a lot of people get stuck in life. Where am I going? What am I doing? Is this the life I thought I was supposed to be in? I've been there. I've worked with so many clients that have been there, and it's not until we just slow down, take
Mhm.
a breath, calm ourselves down, understand what our triggers are, what's holding us back, what are our fears, what traumas are still trapped in there that's really keeping us stuck. We can then
Mhm.
start to say, right, I'm ready to tackle my old beliefs and start taking action. And as soon as I put one foot in front of the other, the rest starts getting clear again, because the path starts to unfold. But that's for me how I see the link in the three of them together. And
Mhm.
that's why I specialize in the nervous system.
Yeah, this is so valuable. I mean, that hypnotism you had on there is just so valuable to me. It really helped.
Well, that's certainly one. That's my calm, confident, and clear hypnosis. That one's quite a specific one for a journey. But there's plenty of other stuff for yourself and other people on my YouTube channel as well.
Mhm.
So feel free to go in there and rummage about. There's ASMR, little reframing stories. There's lots of tips and strategies, and there's also meditations and hypnosis and plenty other bits and pieces in there for anyone that wants to go in and rummage about.
It's very valuable information. How can they find your YouTube channel?
It's quite easy because I've renamed everything as my brand, which is the Holistic Hypnotherapist. So my name is Deborah Craig, and you'll be able to find things, through my own name. But ultimately, especially on YouTube, my handle is at the Holistic Hypnotherapist.
Awesome. Awesome.
So welcome. And if you're looking for me on my website, it's very simple. Again, I'm trying to keep it simple here for people. It's just www.deborahcraig.com. So it's just my name.
That's awesome. I totally thank you for coming on
Oh,
and,
it's amazing. I love being on here with you. It's good to just share knowledge.
it was just so good. I'm because I haven't seen you in over a year.
Oh,
This was great. And
it
I'd love
really
to get
was.
back on again in the future too.
100%. Who knows what I'll be up to by then? I might be filling you in my travels. Who knows?
Yeah, that would be great. It's all positive. Everything we said here is gonna help people. It's so positive.
That's great. I'm glad to be assistance. And for anyone that does need to get that kind of support, there's plenty of freebies out there, not just from me, but from loads of people on whether it's social media or on YouTube. But, you know, I strongly recommend you give yourself a chance by at least starting to work on your nervous system, because when you do that, it will be a game changer.
Definitely. Well, hey, don't jump off.
I would.
Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. And I thank you, Deborah Craig, all the way from Scotland. I'm so happy to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me on, Marianne. Until the next time.
Definitely. Thank you.